Hello, everyone. We're just gonna wait a couple more minutes. I know it's not until 12:30, so we'll wait a few more minutes and then we'll get started. So we'll just wait another minute or so and then we'll get started. All right, so I'm gonna hop in and start. I want to be conscious of everyone's time. Um, if you can just put it in the chat, give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen all right. Can everyone see the slides that I have up now? Cool. So thank you guys for joining. This is interviewing skills for whether it's the career and internship fair that's happening next week, or any research opportunities that come up, or just overall any interview stuff that you guys have. And so my name's Kaylee. I'm the grad assistant for career services. And I work with the School of Healthcare Business, but I work with all students. So what you'll learn today is different types of interviews that you may have, overall interviewing tips, as well as good and kind of like bad negative practices to keep in mind. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Stop me on whatever slide and ask any questions. You can wait till the end, however you see fit. So different types of interviews that you may have throughout your career, whether that's, again, the volunteer and internship fair, whatever opportunities you have there, as well as just kind of like outside interviews. So a screening interview, you could have that just like the initial conversation, kind of like get to know you. That could be either by telephone, in person, virtual, whichever one. And then maybe towards like the second interview, that may be like a peer or not peer, panel or group discussion that's maybe in person or virtual, but not with the initial interviewer that you had, but maybe someone that works for the department, or someone that's like a supervisor, or just a colleague. And then within those interviews, whether that's the screening or your third interview, there may be behavior specific questions. So that is questions specific about your experiences, whether they are past or current. And then as conversations go, common questions that may be asked, I would say the number one question that is asked, regardless of what level interview you have, is tell me about yourself. So tell me about yourself, it can be your elevator pitch. So that would be about a 60-second max pitch. So like whether that's, my name is blank, I am a junior at NCPHS, I do this, this, and this. Anything that potentially could relate to the job. And so another one is, why are you interested in this opportunity? So you were asked to be interviewed for this opportunity for a reason. So you just want to reassure the employer why you're the perfect candidate, why you should be there, because again, they want you to be there. That's why you have the interview. And then another couple common questions are, what are your strengths and weaknesses? When those questions come up, you want to start with your weakness first. So start with the negative first. And then you always want to end with your strength / positive, and how you like overcame that, as well as being able to relate your strengths and or weaknesses to the job opportunity. And then for what are your career goals, this could be, they could phrase it in a way like, what do you see yourself doing in 5 years, 10 years? You can say like, I would like to be in a assistant director position. I plan on being the senior research analyst, whatever you feel can relate to this, but also you can say, if you don't see yourself in, I don't want to say like the medical field, or at least clinical field, you can say like, I plan on doing XYZ. Just again, relating it back to the job currently. And so for the behavioral based questions, usually those are how you are going to kind of, hence the name, like behavior in certain situations. So how you have or had dealt with a situation. So give an example of an occasion when you use. Sorry, was there a question? Okay. So for like behavioral based questions, these are a few that you would give. Like a common one is, tell me about how you worked effectively under pressure. How you give me an example of how you dealt with a difficult situation, whether that's with a coworker, a supervisor, customer, how you yeah, so sorry, I just got a direct message. That's gonna be the next slide, about giving an example of logistics to solve a problem. So yeah, these may not be the exact questions that are asked, but don't be surprised if someone asks how you dealt with a difficult conversation. So again, you want to start off like I'll go to the next slide. So how you answered that specific behavioral based question. So how did you overcome to solve a problem? So you want to communicate in professionalism. So present with confidence and demonstrate specific skills, as well as, like I said, provide examples of how you overcame the situation or scenario. So for instance, let's say you were supervising someone and they messed up a measurement. You could just say, I was in a lab where a colleague mismeasured a pipette, and I walked through with them being like, hey, just by the way, this is, you mismeasured, maybe we can restart. And then how you move forward is, or how we can move forward is just double checking like the pipettes, as well as making sure that we walk through this together. So at least assuring, you could have something like that. So just reassuring the employer, person you're interviewing with, that there was something negative that happened, but this is how you dealt with it in a professional manner. And then how you can keep that professionalism going with the job you are applying for. Thank you. So yeah, any questions, comments, concerns about specific like types of questions that may be asked during an interview before we move forward? If not, we can go right along. And if I need to go back to, that's totally fine as well. So we will chug along. So again, so as you provide examples, you want to think of the acronym STAR, so situation, task, action, and result. So like I said before, I should have landed on this as I was describing the scenario, is pick a certain situation that you felt like was difficult, and then the task is what goals were set, whether that, if it was with the individual that was in the situation, or if it a goal for yourself being like, I should have handled it this way, or I did well on this. And then again, like the action steps where you want to move forward, and then what outcomes happen as a result. Again, whether that's with someone that dealt with the situation in the moment, or I guess like future results. And yes, the recording will be available afterwards. So if you need to hop off in like 5 minutes, that's totally fine. So yeah. So as you prepare for an interview, you want to, of course, know the audience, whether that's the hiring manager, recruiter, the director of the program, whoever's interviewing you. They want to hear your motivation for the job and or role. So like the why. So like, I know I've talked with a few students before about the SURF program. So at least making sure you've got the interview, reassuring them why you want this job, like why they wanted to choose you over Sally or whoever. And so again, you want to know whether you're a good fit. So whether, keep in mind the job description. So whether they are asking for someone who works well as a team, is organized, have a certain set of skills, that you're able to work individually, have a certain set of like research skills, clinical skills, communication skills, software skills, whatever they may be looking for. And you want to make sure you not just like think through answers, or you want to make sure that you want to have confidence in your answers, and you want to make sure that you use not confidence, I just used that, not appropriate attitude either, but just making sure you have like a good attitude going into the interview, and again making sure that you have certain skills that you,
I don't know.
Sorry, is there a question?
She can't come, I know.
Is there a question?
What time?
Like, as soon as I get up,
Yeah, we can go at 3:30, something like that. We don't have much rush there.
I mean, I'm gonna go home.
Okay, sorry. So you want to make sure that you don't count on just your knowledge. You want to make sure that you focus on the experience too. So just at least provide examples on how you use your knowledge in certain situations. And again, elevator pitch is a great thing to use and utilize throughout your, like, tell me about yourself, as well as it can incorporate your certain situations. So you may bring up, let's say, like the pipette situation. You may talk about that later in your interview. And you want to, a tip is to, is like, what is one thing that you'd like people to remember you after the interview? So again, not only have confidence, but make sure that you, so kind of, I interpret it as like reading a book. So if you're a writer, you want to make sure that the person is hooked and wanting more. So yeah, at least having the hiring manager be like, okay, this person is a good candidate. We would like to have them as the research analysis, or at least having like a second interview. Yeah. So with the volunteer and internship fair being in person, you want to make sure that as you're communicating, obviously vocally, you also want to make sure that you have like nonverbal communication too. So another acronym to have is SMILE, handshake, and eye contact. You want to make sure that you aren't looking somewhere else, being like, okay, I'm going to go to MGH as you're talking to like sitters of scholars. You want to make sure that you are giving your full attention to that one person and making sure that they're the priority at the moment. And yes, there's going to be other not scholars, other people there, but you want to make sure that they're being heard and making sure that you are giving your all, like, 100% attention to them. And again, you want to make sure that you are open and approachable. You don't want to slouch or having your hands crossed or hands in your pockets. You want to make sure that you, again, are attentive and not, at least it says, put your phone away. You want to make sure that you aren't either holding your phone or at least prioritizing your phone rather than the employer. And so you always want to end the interview with questions. Like the interviewer will ask like, hey, do you have any questions for me? So this would be a good opportunity beforehand. So even before the interview, you want to make sure that you read through their website. Maybe if you have any questions about that you have not seen on the website, you want to make sure that questions that you ask aren't found on the website or found somewhere else. So you want to make sure that you are able to, again, come prepared and show interest in their position. And you can do like 3 to 5 questions. It's up to you, as long as you have, I would say, a minimum of 2 questions. And make sure that questions that you ask have not already been answered. So let's say, like, can you describe a typical day or work in this position? So if the employer already said that it's a Monday to Friday job, 9 to 5, make sure that at least for that question, saying like what type of tasks are involved in this role. What are some challenges that people expect in this position? What is your supervisory style? How many colleagues will I be working with? Will I be supervising anyone? At least those type of questions. And so again, you want to make sure that you don't have the information repeated. You want to make sure that the questions that you have are new, and make sure that the employer, again, like we've said before, that the employer wants to bring you back for a second interview. Any questions so far? I want to make sure that questions are answered as I go through. No? Okay, cool. If you have some at the end, then that's totally fine. All right, so some good practices. I'll go for in-person interviews as well as virtual, just because thanks pandemic, where mostly everything was online. So you want to make sure that you are prepared for both. Arriving early, I'd say, goes for both in-person and virtual. You want to make sure that you show the employer that you arrive on a timely manner. And then you want to make sure that your cell phone or any other devices that can distract you are off. You want to make sure that you want to ask for next steps, or like the rest of the process. So if the employer doesn't answer that question, you can say, what are the next steps for the next interview? Will I be hearing from you in 2 days? Will I be hearing back in 2 weeks, whether I get the position or I don't? At the moment, don't ask about salary or benefits or vacation, at least for the first interview, unless the employer talks about it. But at least if they don't post a salary or benefits, that's more of like a second or third interview, because that's when they ask you for a second interview. That's when they'll get more into details about the role and more logistics, as well as more about the responsibilities. And then following the interview, you want to take notes on how it went, whether that's maybe talking less or talking more about a certain situation, or dialing back on a certain scenario. And then just professional interactions with everyone. So if that's with the receptionist, other colleagues in the waiting area, you want to make sure that you present yourself in a professional way. And then for virtual interviews, at least for both virtual and in person, you want to have business like attire, or like business casual. You don't want to, I'll talk more in the next slide about wearing your attire, but make sure, at least for virtual stuff, that you aren't in like a sweatshirt or anything, just because like framing wise. So like before the virtual interview, you want to make sure that the technology works, whether that's the camera, speaker, whatever. And then again, you want to make sure, regardless if it's virtual or in person, you want to make sure that your interest and enthusiasm is presented through your tone. And you want to make sure that there's no unnecessary feedback, which is why you should test your technology, just so you, again, are full focused on the employer, and want to make sure that you make eye contact. I know it's weird for virtually, like making eye contact with the screen. It's weird because you want to look into the camera, but you also want to look at the person, and making sure that you have gestures, so like smiling, nodding, Make sure that the camera is positioned accordingly. So you don't want to have like laundry in the background. You always want to have kind of like that plain background. And then again, you want to, like I said, framing and eye contact with the camera, not just the screen. So you can go in between, but making sure that the person knows that you're not like dozing off or anything. And again, like the background, you want to make sure that lighting and noise is appropriate. So you want to make sure that you are in like maybe like a study room, or maybe in like your own like bedroom, whatever, and make sure that there's nothing going on around you, because again, you want to make sure that you are attentive to the employer. And again, like posture, and you don't want to make sure that you're like slouching or just kind of like shoulder shrug. You want to, again, be attentive and make sure that you're upright. You don't have to be like a board. You don't have to be like straight like that, but at least making sure that your posture is kind of loose, and making sure that, again, you're focused on the employer. I know it's hard virtually, that you have like other things that may be on your desk, but at least in person, you will of course be in attire, but make sure that you, I know I use a lot of hand gestures, maybe not going too excessive with the hand gestures, but making sure that it's, if you do use hand gestures, making sure it's not like the kind of like waving stuff. So yeah, bad practices during an interview. Like I said before, you want to make sure that you do research beforehand about the company, whether that's when they were founded, how many people have been accepted, just doing like a background check on the company, but at least for making sure that it's not noticeable that you didn't do your research, and making sure that presenting wise, whether it's like one or two things that you research, just making sure that you present in that way, and just being unprofessional, arriving late, using your phone. So like I said before, just presenting yourself as professional and arriving early, not using your phone. So whether that's in person, virtual, career services, we provide mock interviews. So if you have an interview that you really want to get a second interview, we can do a mock interview with you and provide feedback saying like, hey, in certain situations, maybe you should talk more, talk less, focus on this. And typically you should not like badmouth past employers or or use negative language, whether that's about a previous employer or not. Even if the employer, in my experience, have employers that I have worked with or at least interviewed with have not used negative language, or at least quote unquote like foul language. So like the F-bomb, they haven't dropped that during the interview. And I say that like, even if they do use like quote unquote, like again, foul language, like you also don't want to use that, just again, because you want to present as professional. And then you also don't want to, not just like a drink, you don't want to bring your lunch to the interview. So try to plan accordingly. If it's like a small water bottle, that's fine. But if it's like an Nalgene bottle, maybe tuck that away. At least for in-person interviews, you want to at least tuck that away. Yeah, and so at least after the interview, you want to wait until 24 to 48 hours ish, to do a thank you email. So you just want to send an employer a thank you, just saying like, I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me. Reassure them like I am still interested in this position. And then you also want to say like, I really liked talking about XYZ, so at least bring it back to the interview, what you did talk about within the interview. And so you can say you can follow up with me via email or by phone, whatever you feel like using for them to get back to you at. Emails is preferred. I personally have not done like handwritten letters as a thank you. I think handwritten letters are great because they're personable, like it shows commitment, but typically emails are better. And so at least that's how you can follow up. And then that's it for now. So if you have any questions, you can either email myself, I can put it in the chat. Whether if you want to start a mock interview to help prepare for the volunteer and internship fair, which is happening next Tuesday from 12 to 2. So if you would like myself to either look at your resume, or if you want to send an email to careerservices@mcphs to schedule an appointment or use Cardinal Link, you can do that. And yeah, so this will be available, this recording. Are there any questions, comments, concerns? It depends on the employer that are there. We have employers that are there. So off the top of my head, there's MGH, comparative medicine, Sitters for Scholars, Peace Corps, a few other ones. So it depends on the employer what positions they're looking for. Some may have research analysts, some may just have an intern. So it all depends on that. And then the second part, again, that also depends if the interview will happen right on the spot or after. It can be in group discussions, but you can also follow up with the employer if it's an employer that you are interested in. So let's say Peace Corps, if you're interested in a position there, you can reach out to the employer, being like, hey, Peace Corps, I met with you during the MCPHS volunteer and internship fair. I just wanted to follow up if there's any chance we can talk for an interview, or at least you can do like an informational interview. You can always ask the employer, like if they are doing on the spot interviews, or if that's more of a follow-up conversation. So question is, do we bring our resume at the same time as their interview? So if you apply online, they already have your resume. So you don't need to bring it again. But for the fair, make sure you bring a couple hard copies, just so they have the, so let's say Peace Corps is one of the employers that you are interested in, that you would give them your resume like right off the bat rather than emailing it to them. So they can reach out to you being like, hey, we met at the volunteer and internship fair. And so also have them follow up if you haven't followed up with them after meeting them like 48 hours ish afterwards. You can ask for their email at the end of the interview to send them a thank you. If you applied online, someone may reach out to you. So like the hiring manager may send an email. So like let's say I'm the hiring manager and I send you an email. You will already have my email like on file. So you can just take my email and then just send an email that way. If they did not provide you one, then you can ask for their email. So a question is space and having students. From my not understanding, but what I've noticed is like there's always going to be like a fluctuation of students. So it depends. It may hinder a little bit, but at the same time, we'll have people at either one entrance or both entrances, having like coordinating people to come in and out. So there should be like a direction of a flow of students. Yeah, so this is a question about being an international student. So it depends on the employer. You can ask them specifically on having volunteer opportunities. I know on our, as in Career Services Blackboard page, we have a link for InterStride, which in my interpretation is like a LinkedIn for international students. So there are specific companies that have opportunities for international students that have specific visas, specific sponsorships. But at least at the career fair, you can always ask the employer what opportunities there are for international students. So you can register for the fair on campus groups. And then for specific positions, you can, it depends on the employer. You can always leave your resume. I'm with the employer. You can apply beforehand, but you can also check to see exactly what positions that the specific company is looking for. But you can, even if it's like within, like again, I'll use Peace Corps as an example. If they offer like an intern position online, but at the moment they like in person, they're saying we are looking for an analyst, you can still apply for the intern job and also the analyst job. I can provide, I'll stop sharing my screen. I can provide the campus link or campus groups link, so you can register beforehand. You can also, we'll also have like on the spot signups for you. So you don't have, you can show up and then also register beforehand. But I can, let me just. So I just put in the chat the campus link or campus groups link for the career fair. And yeah, so that's where you can find the registration. And so again, the volunteer and internship fair is free. Are there any other questions, comments, concerns that you guys have? You're welcome. To the person who sent me the direct message. If there's no other questions, thank you for coming today, and hopefully we will see you guys at the career fair or the internship and volunteer fair on Tuesday. So yeah, we will see you guys then. Thanks for coming to the skills training or workshop, I should say.